Chapter 455 Extreme Compression. The biggest difference between soul masters with twin martial souls and those with only one was that when soul masters with twin martial souls switched between their martial souls, their soul power would swiftly fuse with the new martial soul. Hero Yuao's spiritual power was sufficiently strong at this point that he could even use both of his martial souls at the same time under certain circumstances. Using both martial souls at the same time meant fusing one distinct part of his soul power with his respective martial souls at the same time. He couldn't do it for a prolonged period of time, and could only do it once or twice before he had to choose one martial soul. However, this method enabled him to connect his two martial souls more perfectly in an actual battle, and if this connection was utilized appropriately, it would be no different from using both martial souls at the same time. Hero Yuao had only just mastered this method. It was a pity that his newfound ability was far from sufficient against an ultimate Douluo like Yu Shishui. He didn't even have a chance to use it. The mysterious heaven technique's pure soul power began to rotate in Hero Yuao's palm. To ensure his safety, Hero Yuao only used half the soul power that he had used when he was experimenting inside his body. Milky white soul power continued to rotate, and gradually became like a whirlpool. It was like a ball of milky white liquid, and seemed very strange and unique. Hero Yuao allowed it to start its rotation before he gradually began to compress the milky white soul power down. He was very careful with his movements, and he made the compression process as balanced as possible. Doing so would hopefully avoid the phenomenon that had occurred the last time, where some parts solidified while other parts remained in liquid form. Since he had decided to do this, he would have to do it as perfectly as possible. Only then would he achieve the best results. Milky white light shone faintly. Hero Yuao concentrated on his task, and the white whirlpool's volume quickly shrank under his manipulations. It didn't take long before it was half its original size. Hero Yuao was especially meticulous in controlling the whirlpool this time, so it didn't show any signs of solidifying. It only became a lot bigger, and rotating it seemed to become increasingly hard. Hero Yuao used even more spiritual power. With his prior experience, he immediately raised his spiritual power while making sure he was even more careful with his manipulation. The white whirlpool decreased in size, while the milky white hues became increasingly withdrawn as the thick liquid-like state began to solidify. It started to spin faster and faster under Hero Yuao's control. Hero Yuao remembered very clearly that every single existence that resembled black holes in the beast god's body was rotating at a speed almost indiscernible to the naked eye. Their rotation speeds were evidently important to utilizing spatial power. He didn't know the trick to that yet, so he had to experiment according to what he could observe right now. The whirlpool began to rotate even faster while it became ever smaller, and slowly began to solidify. Hero Yuao could feel that he was onto something. The tiny whirlpool was gradually compressed to the size of a yellow bean. It had become completely solid at that point, and was shaped like a funnel. It continued rotating vigorously, while the soul power aura it was emanating weakened. Does this mean that I can solidify my soul power and store it externally? That's just miraculous. If I can do that, what will happen if I place this highly compressed soul power into milk bottles? What kind of effect would I achieve? Milk bottles were useful, but the soul power they could contain was ultimately limited, and even milk bottles of higher classes were only equivalent to a soul sage's soul power. Milk bottles weren't that important for higher tier soul engineers. Perhaps I can devise a milk bottle of an even higher class if I didn't have any distractions. Hero Yuao was elated from his surprise discovery. He began to observe the milky funnel even more intricately, without overlooking any details. He continued to use more spiritual power at the same time to compress the funnel, so that he could keep it rotating. The yellow bean gradually became the size of a green bean. Hero Yuao could feel that his soul power was being compressed to almost its maximum level, while its rotation speed seemed to have reached the limit as well. It would be difficult for his spiritual power to make it spin any faster, but its volume hasn't changed qualitatively. No matter how I look at it, it's just a small object that's spinning continuously. How did this happen? When it was inside my body previously, I hadn't compressed it to such a level, and it had already begun absorbing my soul power. Right. It has to continuously absorb soul power. Hero Yuao's eyes lit up. He carefully released a little more soul power, and indeed, the solid funnel that was spinning sensed Hero Yuao's soul power. It seemed to quiver subtly before a powerful gravitational force immediately emerged from it and swallowed the soul power that he had released. The tiny funnel began to spin even faster after swallowing that bit of soul power. Furthermore, the gravitational force that it produced began to strengthen, and Hero Yuao could clearly feel that the little thing was starting to consume the origin energy of heaven and earth around it as well. That wasn't all. This gravitational force was acting on his own body as well, as if it wanted to absorb even more of his soul power. This process was just so strange. Hero Yuao was very excited at this point, and he immediately released another thread of soul power for the funnel to absorb as he closely monitored the funnel's transformations. The tiny funnel began to spin even faster after it consumed that soul power, and was now spinning at a speed so quick that Hero Yuao could barely see what state it was in. More importantly, the funnel no longer needed Hero Yuao's spiritual power to control it after it absorbed his soul power. It could now maintain its high rotation speed on its own. At the same time, it began to absorb the origin energy around it more quickly. Is it strengthening itself on its own? Have I done it? 15 minutes had gone by since Hero Yuao had released this thing, and more strange and mystical phenomena gradually began to appear around it. Hero Yuao's mind was steady and calm. He didn't continue releasing soul power into the funnel under such circumstances. Instead, he focused on closely observing how the funnel transformed after absorbing more of the origin energy of heaven and earth. The funnel's volume had increased after absorbing his soul power twice. Its mass had increased to that of a yellow bean after both instances. The funnel's volume was increasing at a decreasing rate as it continued to absorb the origin energy around it. However, it was still increasing in size as it continued absorbing energy, and its rotation speed continued to increase as well. Hero Yuao attempted to attach his spiritual power to the funnel. He could still do it in the beginning, but now his spiritual power was tossed back out very quickly. The funnel seemed to have created a strange magnetic field with its high-speed rotations. This magnetic field seemed to affect the space around it. That's it. This should be it. If its rotation speed increases to a certain level, and if the funnel itself becomes sufficiently strong, perhaps it will become like the soul power inside a beast god's body. But how am I to store this inside my own body? If I can't store it, then won't everything be meaningless? Hero Yuao wasn't worried. He just sat on his bed with his legs crossed as he used his spiritual power to observe the funnel state. This little thing was continuing to spin faster and faster, and was consuming energy at a continuously faster rate. After an hour, its volume had increased by another 30%. Upon closer inspection, Hero Yuao discovered that the spatial undulations around it weren't obvious, as if the funnel itself was far from strong enough. However, in terms of volume, the funnel seemed similar to those black holes when the beast god was using his soul power. However, even if that was the case, Hero Yuao could already feel that this little thing was very dangerous. It was like a storeroom full of gunpowder that could be ignited at any time, and if anything collided with it, the soul power that was rotating at high speed could become unstable, and would definitely explode. Unfortunately, he was inside an army camp, so he couldn't test how it would look like after it exploded. He would have to find another place for that. Hero Yuao channeled his spiritual power with that thought and enveloped this funnel from the outside as he began to attempt to gradually reduce its speed. This circumstance was different from when the soul power was inside his body. This time, perhaps because the funnel was simply spinning too quickly, he ran into a small problem as he tried to control it. Hero Yuao's spiritual power was just starting to interact with it when the funnel immediately displayed signs of instability, as if it were instantly about to explode. Hero Yuao hurriedly reduced the amount of pressure he was putting on it with his spiritual power, and the tiny funnel stabilized once more. However, that wasn't enough to stump Hero Yuao. First, he used a spiritual barrier to cut off the funnel's connection to the outside world so that it could no longer absorb the origin energy around it to strengthen itself, before gently reducing its rotation speed so that it would gradually slow down in its stabilized state. It took 15 minutes to make this solid state soul power stop spinning completely. The funnel finally returned to a conical shape in his hands, while the compressed soul power began to dissipate swiftly after it was no longer spinning, before Hero Yuao reabsorbed it into his body. This process continued for about 2 hours. Hero Yuao still hadn't discovered the trick after close inspection, but at least he had managed to finish his experiment. Perhaps this introductory experiment will give me even more unexpected surprises. What I need now is to make more observations. I need to go outside. Hero Yuao exited his tent and glanced towards somewhere not far from him, the tent that belongs to Tang Clan. He slowly activated his martial soul and used imitation. His passageway still felt a little painful, but there wasn't a problem if he didn't channel a lot of soul power. He didn't want to give up on such a fantastic opportunity. Many times, inspiration was but something that occurred in an instant, and he might never find the same inspiration again if he missed it. Therefore, Hua Yuan didn't hesitate for too long. He immediately concealed himself through imitation and snuck out of the camp. The Douluo Empire's camp didn't have that many surveillance soul tools. With his ability and intentions, he quickly managed to get out. Hua Yuan accelerated after leaving the army camp, though he used less than 30% of his soul power as he raced into the distance. His physical state was a little better than he had imagined. There wasn't too much of a burden on him as long as he suppressed his soul power to a certain level, a beneficial result for him. He went more than 10 kilometers away from the camp before he slowed down. He found a small hill and went behind it, using his spiritual power to sense if there was anybody around him before he began his experiment again. With his previous experience, Hua Yuan directly released even more soul power than before this time, and began to rotate and compress it. He took only half the time that he did before, and the soul power that he released took the shape of a solid funnel. He was no longer inside the army camp. There was nobody else around him, and he wasn't afraid of this thing exploding anymore. The funnel hovered in midair, its rotation speed increasing very quickly as Hua Yuan continued infusing soul power into it, and it began to absorb the origin energy of heaven and earth around it crazily. It didn't take long before the solid funnel became the size of a fist. White lightning streaks were faintly visible around it, and the space around it also began to contort. Hua Yuan continued to observe closely as he reduced the amount of soul power that he released. This fist-sized solid funnel had a gravitational force much stronger than the first one, and even if he reduced the amount of soul power that he released, this thing would still automatically absorb it. Hua Yuan could clearly feel that his soul power was flowing out from his pores to fuse with the funnel, and all the origin energy within 1,000 square meters around him was being aggregated at lightning speed. The funnel's volume and rotation speed were also increasing continuously. What kind of law does this follow? Hua Yuan wasn't sure, but he understood that the more soul power this funnel contained, the closer it came to the special characteristics of the beast god's soul power. Of course, this was only one of the black holes inside Tian's internal soul power. Hua Yuan stopped releasing soul power as he gradually moved backwards to distance himself from the funnel. To his surprise, he quickly realized that there seemed to be some kind of unknown pulling force coming from his body, as the funnel actually shifted along with him. It was chasing him. Are you kidding me? Hua Yuan wasn't confident of making it stop, as it had become so big. He was astonished, and couldn't be bothered with the fact that his passageways hadn't recovered completely. Light flashed around his body as he used instant teleportation at its maximum range. Hua Yuan disappeared 100 meters away with a flash. The funnel quivered faintly, and seemed to have lost its target. It stopped chasing him. Hua Yuan finally heaved a sigh as he continued shifting backwards. He placed 200 meters between the funnel and himself before he used spiritual detection to scrutinize its state. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.